Panda first!
Hide and seek, reason and rhyme, grand and glorious. Living the dream, yours and mine, euphoria. Hide and seek, reason and rhyme, grand and glorious. Living the dream, yours and mine, euphoria. Stone and feather move outside your head. Now or never, strong in every step. Give me a sign, hitting the mark. Take to the sky, chasing the stars. Open your eyes, watching afar. Waiting to fly, this is the start. Hide and seek, reason and rhyme, grand and glorious. Living the dream, yours and mine, euphoria.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the cafe. Today, I will be starting Princess Bride because we are still up for a little bit of a debate of what to have me read as we've reached that goal. So let me go ahead and get the timer started. Resume. And so we are going to start because I had a little bit of a sorry, a little bit of a sneezing fit. Um, had a little bit of a thing in the server of what should we read today, or what should we read? Four books were suggested, so Princess Bride overwhelmingly won out. So that is what I'm going to start with until we can get a definitive answer of what people want me to read, and more than just one person. So we have Princess Bride, Chapter 1. This is my favorite book in all the world, though I have never read it. How is such a thing possible? I'll do my best to explain. As a child, I had simply no interest in books. I hated reading. I was very bad at it. And besides, how could you take the time to read when there were games that shrieked for playing? Basketball, baseball, marbles. I could never get enough. I wasn't even good at them, but give me a football and an empty playground, and I could invest last-second triumphs that would bring tears to your eyes. School was torture. Miss, Miss Roginski, who was my favorite teacher for the third through fifth grades, would have meeting after meeting with my mother. I don't feel Billy is perhaps extending himself quite as much as he thought, or he might. Or, when we test him, Billy does really exceptionally well, considering his class standing. Or, most often, I don't know, Mrs. Goldman. What are we going to do about Billy? Excuse me. What are we going to do about Billy? That was the phrase that haunted me those first 10 years. I pretended not to care, but secretly, I was petrified. Everyone and everything was passing me by. I had no real friends, no single person who shared an equal interest in all games. I seemed busy, busy, busy. But I suppose, if pressed, I might have admitted that, for all my frenzy, I was very much alone. What are we going to do about you, Billy? I don't know, Miss Roginski. How could you have failed this reading test? I've heard you use every word with my own ears. I'm sorry, Miss Roginski. I must have not been thinking. You're always thinking, Billy. You just weren't thinking about the reading test. I could only nod. What was it this time? I don't know. I can't remember. Was it Stanley Hack again? Stan Hack was the Cubs' third baseman for these and many other years. I saw him play once from a bleacher seat, and even at that distance he had the sweetest smile I've ever seen, and to this day I swear he smiled at me several times. I just worshipped him. He could also hit a ton. Bronco Nagurski, he's a football player, a great football player, and the paper last night said he might come back and play for the Bears again. He retired when I was little, but if he came back and I could get someone to take me to a game, I could see him play, and maybe, if whoever took me also knew him, I could meet him after, and maybe if he was hungry, I might let him have a sandwich I might have brought with me. I was trying to figure out what kind of sandwich Bronco Nagurski would like. She just sagged at her desk. You've got a wonderful imagination, Billy. I don't know what I said. Probably, thank you, or something. I can't harness it, though, she went on. Why is that? I think it's probably I need glasses, and I don't read because the words are so fuzzy. That would explain why I'm all the time squinting. Maybe if I went to an eye doctor who could give me glasses, I'd be the best reader in class, and you wouldn't have to keep me after school so much. She just pointed behind her. Get to work cleaning the blackboards, Billy. Yes, ma'am. I was the best at cleaning blackboards. Do they look fuzzy? Miss Roginski said after a while. Oh no, I just made that up. I never squinted either, but she just seemed so whipped about it. She always did. This had been going on for 3 grades now. I'm just not getting through to you somehow. It's not your fault, Miss Roginski. It wasn't. I just worshipped her too. She was all dumpy and fat, but I used to wish she'd been my mother. I could never make that reality come out right, unless she had been married to my father first, and then they'd gotten divorced and my father had married my mother, which was okay because Miss Roginski had to work, so my father got custody of me. That all made sense. Only they never seemed to know each other, my dad and Miss Roginski. Whenever they'd meet, each year during the Christmas pageant, when all parents came, I'd watch the two of them like crazy, hoping for some kind of secret glimmer or look that could only mean, well, how are you? How's your life been going since our divorce? But no soap. She wasn't my mother. She was just my teacher, and I was her own personal and growing disaster area. You're gonna be all right, Billy. I sure hope so, Miss Roginski. You're a late bloomer, that's all. Winston Churchill was a late bloomer, and so are you. Hey, Pirata. I was about to ask her who he played for, but there was something in her tone that made me know enough not to. And Einstein. Him, I also didn't know. Or what a late bloomer was either. But boy, did I ever want to be one. When I was 26, my first novel, The Temple of Gold, was published by Alfred A. Knopf, which is now part of Random House, which is part of the RCA, which is just part of what's wrong with publishing in America today, which is not part of this story. Anyway, before publication, the publicity people at Knopf were talking to me, trying to figure what they could do to justify their salaries, and they asked who did I want to send advance copies to that might be an opinion maker? And I said, I didn't know anybody like that. And they said, think. Everybody knows somebody. So I got all excited because the idea just came to me. And I said, okay, send a copy to Ms. Roginski, which I figure was logical and, and terrific because if anybody made my opinions, she did. She's although she's all through the Temple of Gold. By the way, only I call her Miss Petulski. Even then I was creative. Who? The publicity lady said. This old teacher of mine. You send her a copy, and I'll sign it, maybe write a little. I was really excited until this publicity guy interrupted with, we were thinking of someone more on the national scene. Very soft, I said, Miss Roginski, you just send her a copy, please, okay? Yes, he said. Yes, by all means. Do you remember how I didn't ask who Churchill played for because of her tone? I must have hit that same tone too just then. Anyway, something must have happened because he right away wrote her name down, asking who it was, Ski or Sky. With the I told him, already hiking through the years, trying to get the inscription fantastic for her. You know, clever and modest and brilliant and perfect like that. First name? That brought me back fast. I didn't know her first name. Miss was all I ever called her. I didn't know her address either. I didn't even know if she was alive or not. I hadn't been back to Chicago in 10 years. I was an only child, both folks gone. Who needed Chicago? Send it to Highland Park Grammar School, I said. The first, and first what I thought I'd write was for Miss Roginski. A rose from your late bloomer. But then I thought that was too conceited. So I decided for Miss Roginski, a weed from your late bloomer would be more humble. Too humble, I decided next. And that was it for bright ideas that day. I couldn't think of anything. Then I thought, what if she doesn't even remember me? Hundreds of students over the years. Why should she? So finally, in desperation, I put, for Miss Roginski, from William Goldman. Billy, you called me, and you said I would be a late bloomer, and this book is for you, and I hope you like it. I was in your class for third, fourth, and fifth grades. Thank you very much. William Goldman. The book came out and got bombed. I stayed in and did the same adjusting. Not only did it not establish me as the freshest thing since Kit Marlowe, it also didn't get read by anybody. Not true. It got read by any number of people, all of whom I knew. I think it is safe to say, however, no strangers savored it. It was a grinding experience, and I reacted as indicated above. So when Miss Radginski's note came, late, it got sent to Nampf, and they took their time relaying it. I was really ready for a lift. Dear Mr. Goldman, thank you for the book. I have not had time to read it yet, but I am sure it is a fine endeavor. I, of course, remember you. I remember all my students. Yours sincerely, Antonia Ranginsky. What a crusher. She didn't remember me at all. I sat there holding the note, rocked. People don't remember me. Really. It's not any paranoid thing. I just have this habit of slipping through memories. Doesn't bother me all that much, except I guess that's a lie. It does. For some reason, I test very high on forgettability. So when Miss Roginski sent me that note making her just like everyone else, I was glad she'd never gotten married. I'd never liked her anyway. She's always been a rotten teacher, and it served her right her first name was Antonia. I didn't mean it, I said out loud right then. I was alone in my one-room job on Manhattan's glamorous West Side and talking to myself. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I went on. You gotta believe that, Miss Roginski. What had happened, of course, was that I'd finally seen the postscript. It was on the back of the thank you note, and what it said was, idiot. Not even the immortal S. Morgenstern could feel more parental than I. S. Morgenstern, The Princess Bride. She remembered. Flashback. 1941. Autumn. I'm a little cranky because my radio won't get the football games. Northwestern is playing Notre Dame. It starts at 1, and by 1:30 I can't get the game. Music, news, soap operas, everything, but not the biggie. I call for my mother. She comes. I tell her my radio's busted. I can't find Northwestern, Notre Dame. She says, "You mean the football?" "Yes, yes, yes," I say. "It's Friday," she says. "I thought they played on Saturday." Am I an idiot? I lie back, listening to the soaps. And after a little, I try finding it again, and my stupid radio will pick up every Chicago station except the one carrying the football game. I really holler now, and again my mother tears in. "I'm gonna heave this radio right out the window," I say. "It won't get it. It won't get it. I cannot make it get it." "Get what?" she says. "The football game," I say. "How dumb are you?" "The game!" "Saturday. And watch your tongue, young man," she says. "I already told you. It's Friday." She goes again. Was there ever so ample a dunce? Humiliated, I flick around on my trusty Zenith, trying to find the football game. I was so frustrating. I was lying there, sweating, and my stomach felt like crazy. And I was pounding the top of the radio to make it work right. And that was how they discovered I was delirious with pneumonia. Pneumonia today is not what it once was, especially when I had it. 10 days or so in the hospital, and then home for the long recuperating period. I guess it was 3 more weeks in bed, a month maybe. No energy, no games even. I just was this lump going through a strength gathering time, period. Which is how you have to think of me when I came upon The Princess Bride. It was my first night home, drained, still one sick cookie. My father came in. I thought to say good night. He sat on the end of my bed. "Chapter 1. The Bride," he said. It was then, only I kind of looked up and saw he was holding a book. That alone was surprising. My father was next to illiterate, in English. He claimed from Florin, the setting of The Princess Bride, and there he had been no fool. He said once he would have ended up a lawyer, and maybe so. The facts are when he was 16 he got a shot at coming to America, gambled on the land of opportunity, and lost. There was never much here for him. He was not attractive to look upon, very short, and from an early age bald. And he was ponderous at learning. Once he got a fact, it stayed, but the hours it took to pass into his cranium were not to be believed. His English always stayed ridiculously immigranty, and that didn't help him either. He met my mother on the boat over, got married later, and, when he thought they could afford it, had me. He worked forever as the number 2 chair in the least successful barber shop in Highland Park, Illinois. Toward the end, he used to doze all day in his chair. He went that way. He was gone an hour before the number 1 guy realized it. Until then, he just thought my father was having a good doze. Maybe he was. Maybe that's all any of this is. When they told me I was terribly upset. But I thought at the same time it was an almost existence-proving way for him to go. Anyway, I said, "Huh? What? I didn't hear." I was so weak and so terribly tired. Chapter 1. The Bride. He held up the book then. "I'm reading it to you, for relax." He practically shoved the book in my face. By S. Morgenstern, great Florinese writer. The Princess Bride. He, too, came to America. S. Morgenstern, dead now in New York. The English is his own. He spoke 8 tongues. Here my father put down the book and held up all his fingers. 8. Once in Florence City, I was in his cafe. He shook his head now. He was always doing that, my father. shaking his head when he said it wrong. Not his cafe. He was in it. Me too. The same time. I saw him. S. Morgenstern. He had her head like this. That big. And he shaped his hands like a big balloon. Great man in Florence City. Not so much in America. Has it got any sports in it? Fencing, fighting, torture, poison, true love, hate, revenge, giants, hunters, bad men, good men, beautifulest ladies, snakes, spiders, beasts of all natures and descriptions, pain, death, brave men, coward men, strongest men, chases, escapes, lies, truths, passion, miracles. Sounds okay, I said, and I kind of closed my eyes. I'll do my best to stay awake, but I'm awful sleepy, Daddy. Who can know when his world is going to change? Who can tell before it happens that every prior experience, all the years, were in preparation for nothing? Picture this now. An all but illiterate old man struggling with an enemy tongue, an all but exhausted young boy fighting against sleep, and nothing between them but the words of another alien painfully translated from native sounds to foreign. Who could suspect that in the morning a different child would wake? I remember, for myself, only trying to beat back fatigue. Even a week later, I was not aware of what had begun that night. The doors that were slamming shut while others slid into the clear. Perhaps I should have at least known something, but maybe not. Who can sense revelation in the wind? What happened was just this. I got hooked on the story. For the first time in my life, I became actively interested in a book. Me, the sports fanatic. Me, the game freak. Me, the only 10-year-old in Illinois with a hate on for the alphabet, wanted to know what happened next. What became of beautiful Buttercup and poor Wesley and Inigo, the greatest swordsman in the history of the world? And how really strong was Fezzik? And were there limits to the cruelty of Vicini, the devil Sicilian? Each night my father read to me, chapter by chapter, always fighting to sound the words properly, to nail down the sense. And I lay there, eyes kind of closed, my body slowly beginning the long flow back to strength. It took, as I said, probably a month, and in that time he read The Princess Bride twice to me. Even when I was able to read myself, this book remained his. I would never have dreamt of opening it. I wanted his voice, his sounds. Later, years later even, sometimes I might say, how about the duel on the cliff with Inigo and the man in black? And my father would gruff and grumble and get the book and lick his thumb, turning pages till the mighty battle began. I loved that. Even today, that's how I summon back my father when the need arises. Slumped and squinting and halting over words, giving me Morgenstern's masterpiece as best he could. The Princess Bride belonged to my father. Everything else was mine. There wasn't an adventure story anywhere that was safe from me. Come on, I would say to Miss Roginski when I was well again. Stevenson. You keep saying Stevenson. I've finished Stevenson. Who now? And she would say, well, try Scott. See how you like him. So I tried old Sir Walter, and I liked him well enough to butt through a half dozen books in December. A lot of that was Christmas vacation, when I didn't have to interrupt my reading for anything but now and then a little food. Who else? Who else? Cooper, maybe, she'd say, and off I went into the Deerslayer and all the leather stocking stuff. And then on my own, one day, I stumbled onto Dumas and D'Artagnan, and that got me through most of February, those guys. You've become, before my very eyes, a novelholic, Ms. Roginski said. Do you realize you are spending more time now reading than you used to spend on games? Do you know that your arithmetic grades are gradually getting worse? I never minded when she knocked me. We were alone in the schoolroom, and I was after her for somebody good to devour. She shook her head. You cer- you're certainly blooming, Billy, before my very own eyes. I just don't know into what. I just stood there and waited for her to tell me to read somebody. You're impossible standing there waiting. She thought a second. All right, try Hugo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Hugo, I said. Hunchback. Thank you. And I turned, ready to begin my sprint to the library. I heard her words sigh behind me as I moved. This can't last. It just can't last. But it did. And it has. I am as devoted an adventurer now as then. And that's never going to stop. That first book of mine I mentioned, The Temple of Gold. Do you know where the title comes from? From the movie Gunga Din, which I've seen 16 times, and I still think it's the greatest adventure movie ever, ever, ever made. True story about Gunga Din. When I got discharged from the army, I made a vow never to go back on an army post. No big deal. Just a simple lifelong vow. Okay, now I'm home the day after I get out, and I've got a buddy at Fort Sheridan nearby, and I call to check in, and he says, "Hey, guess what's on post tonight? Gunga Din." "We'll go," I said. "It's tricky," he said. "You're a civilian." Upshot. I got back into uniform the first night I was out and snuck onto the army post to see that movie. Snuck back. A thief in the night. Heart pounding, the sweats, everything. I'm addicted to action adventure, call it what you will, in any way, shape, etc. I never missed an Alan Ladd picture, an Errol Flynn picture. I still don't miss John Wayne pictures. My whole life really began with my father reading me the Morgenstern when I was 10. Fact, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is, no question, the most popular thing I've ever been connected with. When I die, if the Times gives me an obit, it's going to be because of Butch. Okay, now what's the scene everybody talks about? The single moment that stays fresh for you and me in the masses. Answer: the jump off the cliff. Well, when I wrote that, I remember thinking of those cliffs they were jumping off of. Those were the cliffs of insanity that everybody tries to climb in The Princess Bride. In my mind, when I wrote Butch, I was thinking back into further into my mind, remembering my father reading the rope climb up the cliffs of insanity and the death that was lurking right behind. That book was the single best thing that happened to me. Sorry about that, Helen. Helen is my wife. The hotshot child psychiatrist. And long before I was even married, I knew I was going to share it with my son. I knew I was going to have a son, too. So when Jason was born, if he'd been a girl, he would have been Pamby. Can you believe that? A woman child psychiatrist who would give her kids such names. Anyway, when Jason was born, I made a mental note to buy him a copy of The Princess Bride for his 10th birthday, after which I promptly forgot all about it. Flash forward. The Beverly Hills Hotel last December. I'm going mad having meetings on Era 11's The Stepford Wives, which I'm adapting for the silver screen. I call my wife in New York at dinner time, which I always do. It makes her feel wanted. And we're talking, and at the close she says, "Oh, we're giving Jason a 10-speed bike. I bought it today. I thought that was fitting, don't you?" "Why fitting?" "Oh, come on, Willie. 10 years, 10 speeds. Is he 10 tomorrow?" It went clean out of my head. "Call us at supper time tomorrow, and you can wish him a happy." "Helen," I said then, "listen, do me something. Buzz the 999 bookshop and have them send over The Princess Bride." "Let me get a pencil." She was gone a while. "Okay, shoot. W- The what bride? Princess by S. Morgenstern. It's a kid's classic. Tell him I'll quiz him on it when I'm back next week, and that he doesn't have to like it or anything. But if he doesn't, tell him I'll kill myself. Give him that message exactly. Please. I wouldn't want to apply any extra pressure or anything." Kiss me, my fool. Moi. No starlets now. This was always her sign-off line when I was alone and on the loose in sunny California. They're extinct, dummy. That was mine. We hung up. Now, the next afternoon, it so happened, from somewhere, there actually appeared a living, sun-tanned, breathing deeply starlet. I'm lolling by the pool, and she moves by in a bikini, and she is gorgeous. I'm free for the afternoon. I don't know a soul, so I start playing a game about how I can approach this girl so she won't laugh out loud. I never do anything, but ogling is great exercise, and I'm a major league girl watcher. Sorry, throat just dried up. Had a coughing fit. Okay. Excuse me. I can't come up with any approach that connects with reality, so I start to swim my laps. I swim a quarter mile a day because I have a bad disc at the base of my spine. Up and back, up and back. 18 laps. And when I'm done, I'm hanging on the deep end, panting away, and over swims the starlet. She hangs on the ledge, in the deep end too, maybe all of 6 inches away, hair all wet and glistening, and the body's under water, but you know it's there, and she says, "This happened now." Pardon me, aren't you the William Goldman who wrote Boys and Girls Together? That's like my favorite book in all the world. I clutch the ledge and nod. I don't remember what I said exactly. Lie, I remember exactly what I said, except it's too goon-like to put it down. Ye gods, I'm 40 years old. Goldman, yes, Goldman. I'm Goldman. It came out all in one word, so there's no telling what language she thought I was responding in. I'm Sandy Sterling, she said. Hi. Hi, Sandy Sterling. I got out, which was pretty suave for me anyway. I'd say it again if the same situation came up. Then my name was paged. The Xanax won't leave me alone, I say, and she breaks out laughing, and I hurry to the phone, thinking it really all that clever, and by the time I get there, I decide yes, it was, and into the receiver I say, clever, not hello, not Bill Goldman, clever is what I say. Did you say clever, Willie? It's Helen. I'm in a story conference, Helen, and we're speaking tonight at supper time. What are you calling at lunch for? Hostile, hostile. Never argue with your wife about hostility when she is a certified Freudian. It's just they're driving me crazy with stupid notions of this story conference. What's up? Nothing. Probably, except the Morgenstern's out of print. I've checked with Doubleday too. You sounded kind of like it might be important, so I'm just letting you know Jason will have to be satisfied with his very fitting 10-speed machine. Not important, I said. Sandy Sterling was smiling from the deep end, straight at me. Thanks though, anyway. I was about to hang up, then I said, well, as long as you've got this far, call Argosy on 59th Street. They specialize in out-of-print stuff. Argosy, 59th. Got it. Talk to you at supper. She hung up. Without saying, no starlets now. Every call she ends with that, and now she doesn't. Could I have given it away by something in my tone? Helen's very spooky about that, being a shrink and all. Guilt, like pudding, began bubbling on the back burner. I went back to my lounge chair, alone. Sandy Sterling swam a few laps. I picked up my New York Times. A certain amount of sexual tension in the vicinity. Done swimming, she asked. I put my paper down. She was by the edge of the pool now, nearest my chair. I nod, staring at her. Which Zanuck, Dick or Daryl? It was my wife, I said, emphasis on the last word. Didn't phase her. She got out and lay down in the next chair, top heavy but golden. If you like them that way, you had to like Sandy Sterling. I like them that way. You're out here on Levin, aren't you? Stepford Wives. I'm doing the screenplay. I really loved that book. That's, like, my favorite book in all the world. I'd really love to be in a picture like that, written by you. I'd do anything for a shot like that. So there it was. She was putting it right out there, on the line. Naturally, I set her straight fast. Listen, I said, I don't do things like that. If I did, I would, because you're gorgeous. That goes without saying. And I wish you joy. But life's too complicated without that kind of thing going on. That's what I thought I was going to say. But then I figured, hey, wait a minute. What law is there that says you have to be in the token Puritan of the movie business? I've worked with people who keep card files on this kind of thing. True, asked Joyce Hart Haber. Have you acted a lot in features? I heard myself asking. Now, I was really passionate to know the answer to that one. Nothing really enlarged my boundaries. You know what I mean? Mr. Goldman? I looked up. It was the assistant lifeguard. For you again. He handed me the phone. Willie? Just the sound of my wife's voice sent sheer blind misgivings through each and every bit of me. Yes, Helen? You sound funny. What is it, Helen? Nothing, but it can't be nothing or you wouldn't have called me. What's the matter, Willie? Nothing is the matter. I was trying to be logical. You did, after all, place the call. I was merely trying to ascertain why. I can be pretty distant when I put my mind to it. You're hiding something. Nothing drives me crazier than when Helen does that. Because, see, with this horrible psychiatrist background of hers, she only accuses me of hiding things from her when I'm hiding things from her. Helen, I'm in the middle of a story conference now. Just get on with it. So there it was again. I was lying to my wife about another woman, and the other woman knew it. Sandy Sterling, in the next chair, smiled dead into my eyes. Argosy doesn't have the book. Nobody has the book. Goodbye, Willie. She hung up. Wife again? I nodded, put the phone on the table by my lounge chair. You sure talk to each other a lot. I know, I told her. It's murder trying to get any writing done. I guess she smiled. There was no way I could stop my heart from pounding. Chapter 1. The Bride, my father said. I must have jerked around or something, because she said, huh? I began, I began, nothing, I finally said. Easy, she said, and she gave me a really sweet smile. She dropped her hand over mine for just a second, very gentle and reassuring. I wondered, was it possible she was understanding too? Gorgeous and understanding? Was that legal? Helen wasn't ever understanding. She was always saying she was. I understand what you're saying, Willie. But secretly, she was ferreting out my neuroses. No, I guess she was understanding. What she wasn't was sympathetic. And of course, she wasn't gorgeous too. Skinny, yes. Brilliant, yes. I met my wife in graduate school, I said to Sandy Sterling. She was getting her PhD. Sandy Sterling was having a little trouble with my train of thought. We were just kids. How old were you? Do you want my real age or my baseball age? I really laughed then. Gorgeous and understanding and funny. Fencing, fighting, torture, my father said. Love, hate, revenge, giants, beasts of all natures and descriptions. Truth, passion, miracles. It was 12:35 and I said, one phone call, okay? Okay. New York City information, I said in the receiver, and when I was through, I said, could you give me the names of some Fourth Avenue bookshops, please? There must be 20 of them. Fourth Avenue is used an out-of-print book center of the English-speaking chapter of the civilized world. While the operator looked, I turned to the creature on the next lounge and said, My kid's 10 today. I'm kind of I'd kind of like for him to have this book from me. A present. Won't take a sec. Swing, Sandy Sterling said. I list one bookstore called the Fourth Avenue Bookshop, the operator said, and she gave me the number. Can't you give me any of the others? They're all down there in a clump. If you, we ill, gave me names, I can help you, the operator said, speaking bell talk. This one'll do, I said, and I got the hotel operator to ring through for me. Listen, I'm calling from Los Angeles, I said, and I need The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern. Nope, sorry, the guy said, and before I could say, well, could you give me the names of the other bookstores down there? He hung up. Get me that number back, please, I said to the hotel operator. When the guy was on the line again, I said, this is your Los Angeles correspondent. Don't hang up so fast this time. I ain't got it, mister. I understand that. What I'd like is, since I'm in California, could you give me the names and numbers of some of the other bookstores down there? They might have it, and there aren't exactly an abundance of New York Yellow Pages drifting around out here. They don't help me. I don't help them. He hung up again. I sat there with the receiver in my hand. What's this special book? Sandy Sterling asked. Not important, I said, and hung up. Then I said, yes, it is, and picked up the receiver again. Eventually got my publishing house in New York, Hardcourt Brace Jov- Jovanovich. And after a few more eventuallys, my editor's secretary read me off the names and numbers of every bookstore in the Fourth Avenue area. Hunters, my father was saying now, bad men, good men, beautifulest ladies. He was camped in my cranium, hunched over, balding and squinting, trying to read, trying to please, trying to keep his son alive and the wolves away. It was 1:10 before I had the list completed and rang off from the secretary. Then I started with the bookstores. Listen, I'm calling from Los Angeles on the Morgenstern book, The Princess Bride, and sorry, busy signal. Not for years. Another busy. 1:35. Sandy swimming, getting a little angry too. She must have thought I was putting her on. I wasn't, but it sure looked that way. Sorry. Had a copy in December. No soap, sorry. This is a recorded announcement. The number you have dialed is not in working order. Please hang up and nope. Sandy really upset now, glaring, gathering debris. Who reads Morgenstern today? Sandy going, gorgeous, gone. Bye, Sandy. Sorry, Sandy. Sorry, we're closed. 1:55 now. 4:15 in New York. Panic in Los Angeles. Busy. No answer. No answer. Florinese, I think. Somewhere in the back. I sat up in my lounge chair. His accent was thick. I need the English translation. I don't get much call from Morgenstern nowadays. I don't any more know what I got back there. You come in tomorrow. You look around. I'm in California, I said. Majagana, he said. It would mean just a great deal to me if you'd look. You gonna hold on while I do it? I'm not gonna pay for this call. Take your time, I said. He took 17 minutes. I just hung on, listening. Every so often I'd hear a footstep, or a crash of books, or a grunt. Ach! Ach! Finally. Well, I got the Florinese, like I thought. So close. But not the English, I said. And suddenly he's yelling at me. What, are you crazy? I break my back and he says I haven't got it. Yes, I got it. I got it right here. And believe me, it's gonna cost a pretty penny. Great. Really? No kidding? Now listen. Here's what you do. Get yourself a cab and tell him to take the book straight up to Park and Mr. California Mashagana, you listen now. It's coming up a blizzard and I'm going no place and neither of these books without money. 6.50 on the barrel each. You want the English? You got to take the Florinese. And I close at 6. These books don't leave my premises without $13 changing hands. Don't move, I said, hanging up. And who do you call when it's after hours and Christmas on the horizon? Only your lawyer. Charlie, I said when I got him, please do me this. Go to Fourth Avenue, Abromowitz. Give him $13 for 2 books. Taxi up to my house and tell the doorman to take them to my apartment. And yes, I know it's snowing. What do you say? This is a bizarre request. I have to agree to do it. I called Abramowitz yet again. My lawyer is hot on the trail. No checks, Abramowitz said. You're all heart. I hung up, started figuring. More or less 120 minutes long distance at 135 per first 3 minutes, plus 13 for the books, plus probably 10 for Charlie's taxi, plus probably 60 for his time to 250 maybe. All for my Jason to have the Morgenstern. I leaned back and closed my eyes. 250, not to mention 2 solid hours of torment and anguish. And let's not forget Sandy Sterling. A steal. They called me at 7:30. I was in my suite. He loves the bike, Helen said. He's practically out of control. Fabo, I said. And your books came. What books? I said. Chevalier was never more casual. The Princess Bride. In various languages. One of them. Fortunately English. Well, that's nice, I said, still loose. I practically forgot. I asked to have 'em sent. How'd they get here? I called my editor's secretary and had her scrounge up a couple copies. Maybe they had them at Harcourt. Who knows? They did have copies at Harcourt. Can you buy that? I'll get to why in the next pages, probably. Give me the kid. Hi, he said a second later. Listen, Jason, I told him. We thought about giving you a bike for your birthday, but we decided against it. Boy, are you wrong. I got one already. Jason has inherited his mother's total lack of humor. I don't know. Maybe he's funny and I'm not. We just don't laugh much together, is all I can say for sure. My Jason is this incredible looking kid. Paint him yellow, he'd mop up the school sumo team. A blimp, all the time stuffing his face. I watch my weight, and old Helen is only visible full front plus on top, while she is the leading child shrink in Manhattan, and our kid can roll faster than he can walk. He's expressing himself through food, Helen always says, his anxieties. When he feels ready to cope, he'll slim down. Hey Jason, Mom tells me this book arrived today. The princess thing. I'd sure like it if maybe you'd give it a read while I'm gone. I loved it when I was a kid, and I'm kind of interested in your reaction. Do I have to love it too? He was his mother's son, all right. Jason, no. Just the truth. Exactly what you think. I miss you, Big Shot. And I'll talk to you on your birthday. Boy, are you wrong. Today is my birthday. We bantered a bit more, long past when there was much to say. Then I did the same with my spouse, and hung up, promising a return by the end of the week. It took two. Conferences dragged, producers got inspirations that had to carefully get shot down, directors needed their egos soothed. Anyway, I was longer than anticipated in sunny Cal. Finally, though, I was allowed to return to the care of safety and safety of the family. So I quickly buzzed to LA Airport before anybody's mind changed. I got there, which I always do when I come back, because I had to load up my pockets with doodads and such for Jason. Every time I get home from a trip, he runs, waddles, to me hollering, let me see the pockets. And then he goes through all my pockets, taking out his graph. And once the loot is totaled, he gives me a nice hug. Isn't it awful what we'll do in this world to feel wanted? Let me see the pockets, Jason shouted, moving to me across the foyer. It was a supper time Thursday, and, while he went through his ritual, Helen emerged from the library and kissed my cheek, going, what a dashing looking fellow I have, which is also a ritual, and laden with gifts. Jason kind of hugged me and waddled off, to his room. Angelica's just getting dinner on, Helen said. You couldn't have timed it better. Angelica? Helen put her finger to her lips and whispered, it's her third day on, but I think she may be a treasure. I whispered back, what was wrong with the treasure we had when I left? She'd only been with us a week then. She proved a disappointment, Helen said. That was all. Helen is this brilliant lady. Junior Phi Beta in college, every academic honor conceivable, really an intellect of startling breadth and accomplishment. Only she can't keep a maid. First, I guess she feels guilty having anybody, since most of the anybodies available nowadays are black or Spanish, and Helen is ultra super liberal. Second, she's so efficient, she scares them. She can do everything better than they can, and she knows it, and she knows they know it. Third, once she's got them panicked, she tries to explain, being an analyst, why they shouldn't be frightened, and after a good solid half-hour ego search with Helen, they're really frightened. Anyway, we have had an average of 4 treasures a year for the last few years. Sorry, throat's drying out. We've been running in bad luck, but it'll change, I said, just reassuringly as I know how. I used to heckle her about the help problem, but I learned that was not necessarily wise. Dinner was ready a little later, and with an arm around my wife and an arm around my son, I advanced towards the dining room. I felt at that moment safe, secure, all the nice things. Supper was on the table: creamed spinach, mashed potatoes, gravy, and pot roast. Terrific, except I don't like pot roast, since I'm a rare meat man. But creamed spinach I have a lech for. So, all in all, a more than edible spread was set across the tablecloth. We sat. Helen served the meat. The rest we passed. My pot roast slice was not terribly moist, but the gravy could compensate. Helen rang. Angelica appeared, maybe 20 or 18, swarthy, slow moving. Angelica, Helen began. This is Mr. Goldman. I smiled and said hi, and waved a fork. She nodded back. Angelica, this is not meant to be construed as criticism, since what happened is all my fault, but in the future we must both try very hard to remember that Mr. Goldman likes his roast beef rare. This was roast beef, I said. Helen shot me a look. Now, Angelica, there is no problem, and I should have told you more than once about Mr. Goldman's preferences. But next time we have boned rib roast, let's all do our best to make the middle pink, shall we? Angelica back to the kitchen. Another treasure down the tubes. Remember now, we all three started this meal happy. 2 of us are left in that state, Helen clearly being distraught. Jason was piling the mashed potatoes on his plate with a practiced and steady motion. I smiled at my kid. Hey, I tried. Let's go a little easy, huh, fella? He splattered another fat spoonful onto his plate. Jason, they're just loaded, I said then. I'm really hungry, Dad, he said, not looking at me. Fill up on the meat then, why don't you? I said, eat all the meat you want. I won't say a word. I'm not eatin' nothin', Jason said, and he shoved his plate away, folded his arms, and stared off into space. If I were a furniture salesperson, Helen said to me, or perhaps a teller in a bank, I could understand. But how can you have spent all these years married to a psychiatrist and talk like that? You're out of the dark ages, Willie. Helen, the boy is overweight. All I suggested is he might have a few potatoes for the rest of the world, or leave a few potatoes for the rest of the world, and stuff on this lovely prime pot roast your treasure has whipped up for my triumphant return. Willie, I don't want to shock you, but Jason happens to have not only a very fine mind, but also exceptionally keen eyesight. When he looks at himself in the mirror, I assure you he knows he is not slender. That is because he does not choose, at this stage, to be slender. He's not that far from dating, Helen. What then? Jason is 10, darling, and not interested, at this stage, in girls. At this stage, he's interested in rocketry. What difference does a slight case of overweight make to a rocket lover? When he chooses to be slender, I assure you, he has both the intelligence and the willpower to become slender. Until that time, please, in my presence, do not frustrate the child. Sandy Sterling in her bikini was dancing behind my eyes. I'm not eatin', and that's it, Jason said then. Sweet child, Helen said to the kid, in that tone she reserves on this earth only for such moments. Be logical. If you do not eat your potatoes, you will be upset, and I will be upset. Your father clearly is already upset. If you do eat your potatoes, I shall be pleased. You will be pleased. Your tummy will be pleased. We can do nothing about your father. You have it in your power to upset all or one, about whom, as I have already said, we can do nothing. Therefore, the conclusion should be clear, but I have faith in your ability to reach it yourself. Do what you will, Jason. He began to stuff it in. You're making a poof out of that kid, I said, not only not loud enough for anybody but me and Sandy to hear. Then I took a deep, deep breath, because whenever I come home, there's always trouble, which is because, Helen says, I bring tension with me. I always need human proof that I've been missed, that I'm still needed, loved, etc. All I know is, I hate being away, but coming home is the worst. There's never really much chance to go into, well, what's new since I'm gone, chit chat, seeing that Helen and I talk every night anyways. I'll bet you're a whiz on that bike, I said. Maybe we'll go for a ride this weekend. Jason looked up from his potatoes. I really loved the book, Dad. It was great. I was surprised that he said it, because naturally I was just starting to work my way into that subject matter. But then, as Helen was saying, Jason ain't no dummy. Well, I'm glad, I said. And was I ever? Jason nodded. Maybe it's even the best I read in all my life. I nibbled away at my spinach. What was your favorite part? Chapter 1, The Bride, Jason said. It really surprised me. Not that Chapter 1 stinks or anything, but there's not that much that goes on compared with the incredible stuff later. Buttercup grows up mostly is all. How about the climb up the cliffs of insanity, I said. That's in Chapter 5. Oh, great, Jason said. And the description of Prince Humperdinck's Zoo of Death? That's in the second chapter. Even greater, Jason said. What knocked me out of it, er, what knocked me out about it, I said, was that it's the very short little passage on the Zoo of Death, but yet somehow you just know it's going to figure it in later. Did you get the same feeling? Mm-hmm. Jason nodded. Great. By then I knew he hadn't read it. He tried to read it, Helen cut in. He did read the first chapter. Chapter 2 was impossible for him, so when he'd made a sufficient and reasonable attempt, I told him to stop. Different people have different tastes. I told him you'd understand, Willie. Of course I understood. I felt just so deserted, though. I didn't like it, Dad. I wanted to. I smiled at him. How could he not like it? Passion, duels, miracles, giants, true love. You're not eating the spinach either, Helen said. I got up. Time to change. I'm not hungry. She didn't say anything until she heard me open the front door. Where are you going? She called then. If I'd known, I would have answered. I wandered through December. No top coat. I wasn't aware of being cold, though. All I knew was I was 40 years old, and I didn't mean to be where I am, or when I was at 40, locked with this genius shrink wife and this balloon son. It must have been 9 when I was sitting in the middle of Central Park, alone, no one near me, no other bench occupied. That was when I heard the rustling in the bushes. It stopped. Then again, very soft. Nearer. I whirled, screaming, Don't you bug me! And whatever it was, friend, foe, imagination, fled. I could hear the running, and I realized something. Right then, at that moment, I was dangerous. Then it got cold. I went home. Helen was going over some notes in bed. Ordinarily, she would come out with something about me being a bit elderly for acts of juvenile behavior, but there must have been danger clinging to me still. I could see it in her smart eyes. He did try, she said finally. I never thought he didn't, I answered. Where's the book? The library, I think. I turned, started out. Can I get you anything? I said no. Then I went to the library, closed myself in, hunted out The Princess Bride. It was in pretty good shape, I realized as I checked the binding, which is when I saw it was published by my publishing house, Harcourt Brace Jona Jovanovich. This was before that. They weren't even Harcourt, Brace and World yet. Just plain old Harcourt, Brace, period. I flicked to the title page, which was funny, since I'd never done that before. It was always my father who'd done the handling. I had to laugh when I read the title, when I saw the real title, because right there it said, The Princess Bride, S. Morgenstern's, a classic tale of true love and high adventure. You had to admire a guy who called his own new book a classic before it was published and anyone else had a chance to read it. Maybe he figured if he didn't do it, nobody would. Or maybe he was just trying to give the reviewers a helping hand. I don't know. I skimmed the first chapter, and it was pretty much exactly as I remembered. Then I turned to the second chapter, the one about Prince Humperdinck, and the little kind of tantalizing description of the Zoo of Death. And that's when I began to realize the problem. Not that the description wasn't there. It was. And again, pretty much as I remembered it. But before you got to it, there was maybe 60 pages of text dealing with Prince Humperdinck's ancestry and how his family got control of Florin, and this wedding, and that child begatting this one over here, who then married somebody else. And then I skipped to the third chapter, the courtship, and that was all about the history of Gilder and how the country reached its place in the world. The more I flipped on, the more I knew. Morgenstern wasn't writing any children's book. He was writing a kind of satiric history of his country and the decline of the monarchy in Western civilization. But my father only read me the action stuff, the good parts. He never bothered with the serious side at all. About 2 in the morning, I called Hiram and Martha's Vineyard. Hiram Hayden's been my editor for a dozen years, ever since Soldier in the Rain, and we've been through a lot together, but never any phone calls at 2 in the morning. To this day, I know he doesn't understand why I couldn't wait till maybe breakfast. I'm sure you're all right, Bill, he kept saying. Hey, Hiram, I began after about the sixth rings. Listen, you guys published a book just after World War One. Do you think it might be a good idea for me to abridge it and we'll republish it now? You sure you're all right, Bill? Fine, absolutely. And see, I just used the good parts. I kind I'd kind of bridge where there were skips in the narrative and leave the good parts alone. What do you think? Bill, it's 2 in the morning up here. Are you still in California? I acted like I was all shocked and surprised, so he wouldn't think I was a nut. I'm sorry, Hiram. My God, what an idiot. It's only 11 in Beverly Hills. Do you think you could ask Mr. Jovanovich, though? You mean now? Tomorrow or the next day? No big deal. I'll ask him anything, only I'm not quite sure I'm getting an accurate reading on exactly what you want. You sure you're all right, Bill? I'll be in New York tomorrow. Call you then about specifics, okay? Could you make it a little earlier in the business day, Bill? I laughed and we hung up, and I called Zig in California. Everett Ziegler had been my movie agent for maybe 8 years. He did the Butch Cassidy deal for me, and I woke him up too. Hey Zig, could you get me a postponement on the Stepford Wives? There's this other thing that's come up. You're contracted to start now. How long a postponement? I can't say for sure. I've never done an abridgment before. Just tell me what you think they'd do. I think if it's a long postponement, they'd threaten to sue and you'd end up losing a job. It came out pretty much as he said. They threatened to sue, and I almost lost the job, and some money, and didn't make any friends in the industry, as those of us in showbiz called movies. But the abridgment got done, and you hold in your hands the good parts version. Why did I go through all that? Helen pressured me greatly to think about an answer. She felt it was important, not that she knows necessarily, but that I know. Because you acted Because you acted crackers, Willie boy, she said, you had me truly scared. So why? I never was worth beans at self-scrutiny. Everything I write is impulse. This feels right. That sounds wrong. Like that. I can't analyze. Not for my own actions, anyway. I know I don't expect this to change anybody else's life the way it altered mine. But take the title words true love and high adventure. I believed in that once. I thought my life was going to follow that path. Prayed that it would. Obviously, it didn't. But I think there's high adventure left anymore. Or I don't think there's high adventure left anymore. Nobody takes out a sword nowadays and cries, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." And true love, you can forget about that too. I don't know if I love anything truly beyond the post or the porterhouse at Peter Luger's and the cheese enchilada at El Parador's. Sorry about that, Helen. Anyway, here's the good parts version, as Morgenstern wrote it, and my father read it to me, and now I give it to you. What you do with it will be of more than passing interest to us all. New York City, December 1972. And for the true love, come here. I think I found it. And not many people can say they have, but I did.
Oh, we're actually at the start of the movie?
We are actually at the start of the book. It's not the movie because I actually skimmed a little bit. You know, it's a little different because I've seen the movie a lot. So that's why I said it. I said the hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Not right now. Let's say I said it in that accent
Are you sure
because
nothing? I can't get you Reese's.
yeah,
I can get you Reese's.
yeah.
As you wish.
You were just you're a bitch.
I love you.
I love you too. Chapter 1, or well, technically chapter 2, but chapter 1, The Bride. The year that Buttercup was born, the most beautiful woman in the world was a French scullery maid named Annette. Annette worked in Paris for the Duke and Duchess de Guiche, and it did not escape the Duke's notice that someone extraordinary was polishing the pewter. The Duke's notice did not escape the notice of the Duchess either, who was not very beautiful and not very rich, but plenty smart. The Duchess set about studying Annette, and shortly found her adversary's tragic flaw chocolate. Armed now, the Duchess set to work. The Palace de Guiche turned into a candy castle. Everywhere you looked, bonbons. There were piles of chocolate covered mints in the drawing rooms, baskets of chocolate covered nougats in the parlors. Annette never had a chance. Inside a season she went from delicate to whopping, and the Duke never glanced in her direction without sad bewilderment clouding his eyes. Annette, it might be noted, seemed only cheerier throughout her enlargement. She eventually married a pastry chef, and they both ate a lot until old age claimed them. Things, it might also be noted, did not fare so cheerily for the Duchess. The Duke, for reasons passing understanding, next became smitten with his very own mother-in-law, which because the Duchess ulcers, or which caused the Duchess ulcers. Only they didn't have ulcers yet. More precisely, ulcers existed. People had them, but they weren't called ulcers. The medical profession at the time called them stomach pains, and felt the best cure was coffee dolloped with brandy twice a day until the pains subsided. The Duchess took her mixture faithfully, watching throughout the years as her husband and her mother blew kisses at each other behind her back. Not surprisingly, the Duchess's grumpiness became legendary, as Voltaire had so ably chronicled, except this was before Voltaire. The year Buttercup turned 10, the most beautiful woman lived in Bengal, the daughter of a successful tea merchant. This girl's name was Aluthra, and her skin was of a dusky perfection unseen in India for 80 years. There have only been 11 perfect complexions in all of India since accurate accounting began. Aluthra was 19 the year the pox plague hit Bengal. The girl survived, even if her skin did not. When Buttercup was 15, Adela Terrell of Sussex on Thames was easily the most beautiful creature. Adela was 20, and so far did she outdistance the world that it seemed certain she would be the most beautiful for many, many years. But then, one day, one of her suitors (she had 104 of them) exclaimed that without question Adela must be the most ideal item yet spawned. Adela, flattered, began to ponder on the truth of the statement. That night alone in her room she examined herself, pore by pore, in her mirror. This was after mirrors. It took her until close to dawn to finish her inspection, but by that time it was clear to her that the young man had been quite correct in his assessment. She was, through no real faults of her own, perfect. As she strolled through the family rose gardens, watching the sun rise, she felt happier than she had ever been. Not only am I perfect, she said to herself, I am probably the first perfect person in the whole long history of the universe. Not a part of me could stand improvising or improving. How lucky I am to be perfect and rich and sought after and sensitive and young. The mist was rising around her as Adela began to think. Well, of course I'll always be sensitive, she thought, and I'll always be rich. But I don't quite see how I'm going to manage to always be young. And when I'm not young, how am I going to stay perfect? And if I'm not perfect, well, what else is there? What indeed? Adela furrowed her brow in desperate thought. It was the first time in her life her brow had ever had to furrow, and Adela gasped when she realized what she had done, horrified that she had somehow damaged it, perhaps permanently. She rushed back to her mirror and spent the morning, and although she managed to convince herself that she was still quite as perfect as ever, there was no question that she was not quite as happy as she had been. She had begun to fret. The first worry lines appeared within a fortnight, the first wrinkles within a month, and before the year was out, creases abounded. She married soon thereafter, the self-same man who accused her of sublimity, and gave him merry hell for many years. Buttercup, of course, at 15, knew none of this, and if she had, would have found it totally unfathomable. How could someone care if she were the most beautiful woman in the world or not? What difference would it have made if you were the only third most beautiful, or the sixth? Buttercup at this time was nowhere near that high, being barely at the top 20, and that primarily on potential, certainly not on any particular care she took in herself. She hated to wash her face. She loathed the area behind her ears. She was sick of combing her hair, and did so as little as possible. What she liked to do, preferred above all else really, was to ride her horse and taunt the farm boy. The horse's name was Horse. Buttercup was never long on imagination, and it came when she called it, went where she steered it, did what she told it. The farm boy did what she told him too. Actually, he was more of a young man now, but he had been a farm boy then, orphaned. He had come to work for her father, and Buttercup referred to him that way still. Farm boy, fetch me this. Get me that, farm boy. Quickly, lazy thing. Trot now, or I'll tell father. As you wish. That was all he ever answered. As you wish. Fetch that, farm boy. As you wish. Dry this, farm boy. As you wish. He lived in a hovel out near the animals, and, according to Buttercup's mother, he kept it clean. He even read when he had candles. I'll leave the lad an acre in my will, Buttercup's father was fond of saying. They had acres then. You'll spoil him, Buttercup's mother always answered. He's slaved for many years. Hard work should be rewarded. Then rather than continue the argument, they had arguments then too, they would both turn on their daughter. You didn't bathe, her father said. I did, from Buttercup. Not with water, her father continued. You reek like a stallion. I've been riding all day, Buttercup exclaimed. You must bathe, Buttercup, her mother joined in. The boys don't like their girls to smell of stables. Oh, the boys, Buttercup fairly exploded. I do not care about the boys. Horse loves me, and that is quite sufficient, thank you. She said the speech loud, and she said it often, but like it or not, things were beginning to happen. Shortly before her 16th birthday, Buttercup realized that it had been now more than a month since any girl in the village had spoken to her. She had never much been close to girls, so the change was nothing sharp, but at least before there was a head nods exchanged when she rode through the village, or along the cart tracks, but now, for no reason, there was nothing. A quick glance away as she approached, that was all. Buttercup cornered Cornelia one morning at the blacksmith's and asked about the silence. "I should think, after what you've done, you'd have the courtesy not to pretend to ask," came from Cornelia. "And what have I done?" "What? What? You've stolen them!" With that, Cornelia fled, but Buttercup understood. She knew who "them" was. The boys. The village boys. The beef-witted, feather-brained, rattle-skulled, clod-pated, dim-domed, noodle-noggined, sap-headed, lunk-knobbed boys. How could anyone accuse her of stealing them? Why would anyone want them anyway? What good were they? All they did were pester and vex and annoy. "Can I brush your horse, Buttercup?" "Thank you, but the farm boy does that." "Can I go riding with you, Buttercup?" "Thank you, but I really do enjoy myself alone." "You think you're too good for anybody, don't you, Buttercup?" "No, no, I don't. I just like riding by myself. That's all." But throughout her 16th year, even this kind of talk gave way to stammering and flushing and, at the very best, questions about the weather. "Do you think it's going to rain, Buttercup?" "I don't think so. The sky is blue." "Well, it might rain." "Yes, I suppose it might." "You think you're too good for anybody, don't you, Buttercup?" "No, I just don't think it's going to rain, that's all." At night, more often than not, they would congregate in the dark beyond her window and laugh about her. She ignored them. Usually the laughter would give way to insult. She paid them no mind. If they grew too damaging, the farm boy handled things, emerging silently from his hovel, thrashing a few of them, sending them flying. She never failed to thank him when he did this. "As you wish," was all he ever answered. When she was almost 17, a man in a carriage came to town and watched as she rode for provisions. He was still there on her return, peering out. She paid him no mind, and, indeed, by himself he was not important. But he marked a turning point. Other men had got out of their way to catch sight of her. Other men had even ridden 20 miles for the privilege, as this man had. The importance here is that this was the first rich man who had bothered to do so, the first noble. But it was this man, whose name is lost to antiquity, who mentioned Buttercup to the Count. The land of Florin was set between where Sweden and Germany would eventually settle. This was before Europe. In theory, it was ruled by King Lotharion and his second wife, the Queen. But in fact, the king was barely hanging on, could only rarely tell day from night, and basically spent his time in muttering. He was very old, every organ in his body had long since betrayed him, and most of his important decisions regarding Florin had certain arbitrary quality that bothered many of the leading citizens. Prince Humperdinck actually ran things. If there had been a Europe, he would have been the most powerful man in it. Even as it was, nobody within 1,000 miles wanted to mess with him. The Count was Prince Humperdinck's only confidant. His last name was Rugen, but nobody needed to use it. He was the only count in the country, the title having been bestowed by the prince as a birthday present for some years before, the happening taking place, naturally, at one of the countess's parties. The countess was considerably younger than her husband. All of her clothes came from Paris. This was after Paris. And she had superb taste. This was after taste too, but only just, and since it was such a new thing, and since the Countess was the only lady in all of Florin to possess it, it is any wonder she is the leading hostess of the land. Eventually, Her passion for fabric and face paint caused her to settle permanently in Paris, where she ran the only salon of international consequence. For now, she busied herself with simply sleeping on silk, eating on gold, and being the single most feared and admired woman in Florinese history. If she had figure faults, her clothes concealed them. If her face was less than divine, it was hard to tell once she got done applying substances. This was before glamour, and if it hadn't been for ladies like the Countess, there never would have been a need for its invention. In sum, the Rugans were couple of the week. In sum, the Rugans were couple of the week in Florin and had been for many years. This is me, and all abridging remarks and other comments will be in this fancy italic type, so you'll know. When I said at the start that I'd never read this book, that's true. My father read it to me, and I just quick skimmed along, crossing out whole sections when I did the abridging, leaving everything just as it was in the original Morgenstern. This chapter is totally intact. My intrusion here is because of the way Morgenstern uses parentheses. The copy editor at Harcourt kept filling the margins of the galley proofs with questions. How can it be before Europe but after Paris? How is it possible this happens before glamour when glamour is an ancient concept? See glamour in the Oxford English Dictionary. And eventually, I am going crazy. What am I going to make of these parentheses? When does this book take place? I don't understand anything. Help! Denise, the copy editor, has done all of my books since Boys and Girls Together, and she has never been as emotional in the margins with me before. I couldn't help her. Either Morgenstern meant them seriously, or he didn't. Or maybe he meant some of them seriously, and some others he didn't. But he never said which were the serious ones. Or maybe it was just the author's way of telling the reader stylistically that this isn't real. It never happened. That's what I think. In spite of the fact that if you read back in Florinese history, it did happen. The facts anyway. No one can say about the actual motivations. All I can suggest to you is, if the parentheses bug you, don't read them. Quick, quick, come! Buttercup's father stood in the farmhouse, staring out the window. Why? This from the mother. She gave away nothing when it came to obedience. The father made a quick finger point. Look. You look. You know how. Buttercup's parents did not have exactly what you might call a happy marriage. All they ever dreamed of was leaving each other. Buttercup's father shrugged and went back to the window. Ah, he said after a while, and a little later again. Ah. Buttercup's mother glanced up briefly from her cooking. Such riches, Buttercup's father said. Glorious. Buttercup's mother hesitated, then put her stew spoon down. This was after stew, but also as everything. When the first man first clambered from the slime and made his first home on land, what he had for supper that first night was stew. The heart swells at the magnificence, Buttercup's father muttered very loudly. What exactly is it, Dumpling? Buttercup's mother wanted to know. You look. You know how, was all he replied. This was their third party spat of the day. Donkey, the mother said, and came over to the window. A moment later she was going, ah, right along with him. They stood there, the two of them, tiny and odd. From setting the dinner table, Buttercup watched them. They must be going to meet Prince Humperdinck some place, Buttercup's mother said. The father nodded. Hunting. That's what the prince does. How lucky were they to have seen them pass by, Buttercup's mother said, and she took her husband's hand. The old man nodded. Now I can die. She glanced at him. Don't. Her tone was surprisingly tender, and probably she sensed how important he really was to her. Because when he did die, 2 years farther on, she went right after and most of the people who knew her well agreed it was the sudden lack of opposition that undid her. Buttercup came close and stood behind them, staring over them, and soon she was gasping too, because the Count and Countess and all their pages and soldiers and servants and courtiers and champions and carriages were passing by the cart track and in front of the farm. The three stood in silence as the procession moved forward. Buttercup's father was a tiny mutt of a man who had always dreamed of living like the Count. He had once been 2 miles from where the Count and the Prince had been hunting, and until this moment that had been the high point of his life. He was a terrible farmer, and not much of a husband either. There wasn't really much in this world he excelled at, and he could never quite figure out how he happened to sire his daughter. But he knew, deep down, that it must have been some kind of wonderful mistake, the nature of which he had no intention of investigating. Buttercup's mother was a gnarled shrimp of a woman, thorny and worrying, who had always dreamed of somehow just once being popular like the Countess was said to be. She was a terrible cook, an even more limited housekeeper. How Buttercup slid from the womb was, of course, beyond her, but she had been there when it had happened. That was enough for her. Buttercup herself, standing half a head over her parents, still holding the dinner dishes, still smelling of horse, only wished that the great procession wasn't quite so far away, so she could see if the Countess's clothes really were all that lovely. As if in answer to her request, the procession turned and began entering the farm. Here? Buttercup's father managed. My God, why? Buttercup's mother whirled on him. Did you forget to pay your taxes? Even if I did, they wouldn't need all that to collect them. And he gestured toward the front of his farm, where now the Count and Countess and all their pages and soldiers and servants and courtiers and champions and carriages were coming closer and closer. But what could they want to ask me about? He said. Go see, Buttercup's mother told him. You go, please. No, you, please. We'll both go. They both went, trembling. Cows, the Count said. They had reached his golden carriage. I would like to talk about your cows, he spoke from inside, his dark face darkened by shadow. My cows? Buttercup's father said. Yes, you see, I'm thinking of starting a little dairy of my own, and since your cows are known throughout the land as being Floren's finest, I thought I might pry your secrets from you. My cows, Buttercup's father managed to repeat, hoping he was not going mad, because the truth was, and he knew it well, he had terrible cows. For years nothing but complaints from the people in the village. If anyone else had had milk to sell, he would have been out of business in a minute. Now, granted, things had improved since the farm boy had come to slave for him. No question, the farm boy had certain skills, and the complaints were quite non-existent now. But that didn't make his the finest cows in Florin. Still, you couldn't argue with the Count. Buttercup's father turned to his wife. What would you say my secret is, my dear? He asked. Oh, there are so many, she said. She was no dummy, not when it came to the quality of their livestock. You two are childless, aren't you? The Count asked them. No, sir, the mother asked. Then let me see her, the Count went on. Perhaps she will be quicker with her answers than her parents. Buttercup, the father called, turning. Come out, please. How did you know we had a daughter? Buttercup's mother wondered. A guess. I assumed it had to be one or the other. Some days I'm luckier than. He simply stopped talking then, because Buttercup moved into view, hurrying from the house to her parents. The Count left the carriage. Gracefully, He moved to the ground and stood very still. He was a big man with black hair and black eyes and great shoulders and a black cape and gloves. "Curtsy, dear," Buttercup's mother whispered. Buttercup did her best, and the Count could not stop looking at her. Understand now, she was barely rated in the top 20. Her hair was uncombed, unclean, her age was just 17, so there was still the occasional glances, the remains of baby fat. Nothing had been done to the child. Nothing was really there but potential. But the Count still could not rip his eyes away. The Count would like to know the secrets behind our cow's greatness. "Is that not correct, sir?" Buttercup's father said. The Count only nodded, staring. Even Buttercup's mother noted a certain tension in the air. "Ask the farm boy. He tends them," Buttercup said. "And is that the farm boy?" came a new voice from inside the carriage, when the Countess's face was framed in the carriage doorway. Her lips were painted a perfect red, her green eyes lined in black. All the colors of the world were muted in her gown. Buttercup wanted to shield her eyes from the brilliance. Buttercup's father glanced back toward the lone figure peering around the corner of the house. "It is. Bring him to me. He is not dressed properly for such an occasion," Buttercup's mother said. "I have seen bare chests before," the Countess replied. Then she called out, "You!" pointed at the farm boy. "Come here." She snapped, her fingers snapped on here. The farm boy did as he was told, and when he was close, the Countess left the carriage. When he was a few paces behind Buttercup, he stopped, head properly bowed. He was ashamed of his attire, worn boots, torn blue jeans, and his hands were tight together in almost a gesture of supplication. "Have you a name, farm boy?" "Wesley, Countess." "Well, Wesley, perhaps you can help us with our problem." She crossed to him. The fabric of her gown grazed his skin. "We are all of us here passionately interested in the subject of cows. We are practically reaching the point of frenzy, such is our curiosity. Why, do you suppose, Wesley, that the cows of this particular farm are the finest in all of Florin?" "What did you do to them?" "I just feed them, Countess." "Well, then, there it is. The mystery is solved. The secret. We can all rest. Clearly the magic is in Wesley's feedings. Show me how you do it, would you, Wesley?" "Feed the cows for you, Countess? Bright lad. When?" "Now will be soon enough." And she held out her arm to him. "Lead me, Wesley." Wesley had no choice but to take her arm, gently. "It is behind the house, madam. It's terribly muddy back there. Your gown will be ruined." "I wear them only once, Wesley, and I burn to see you in action." So off they went to the cowshed. Throughout all this, the Count kept watching Buttercup. "I'll help you," Buttercup called after Wesley. "Perhaps I'd best see it just how he does it," the Count decided. "Strange things are happening," Buttercup's parents said, and off they two went, bringing up the rear of the cow feeding trip, watching the Count, who was watching their daughter, who was watching the Countess, who was watching Wesley. "I couldn't see what he did that was so special," Buttercup's father said. "He just fed them." This was after dinner now, and the family was alone again. "They must like him personally. I had a cat once that only bloomed when I fed him." "Maybe it's the same kind of thing." Buttercup's mother scraped the stew leaves into a bowl. "Here," she said to her daughter, "Wesley's waiting by the back door. Take him his dinner." Buttercup carried the bowl, opened the back door. "Take it," she said. He nodded, accepted, started off to his tree stump to eat. "I didn't excuse you, farm boy," Buttercup began. He stopped, turned back to her. "I don't like what you're doing with Horse." "What you're not doing with Horse is more to the point. I want him cleaned, tonight. I want his hooves varnished, tonight. I want his tail plaited, and his ears massaged, this very evening. I want his stables spotless, now. I want him glistening, and if it takes you all night, it takes you all night." "As you wish." She slammed the door and let him eat in darkness. "I thought Horse had been looking very well, actually," her father said. Buttercup said nothing. You yourself said so yesterday, her mother reminded her. I must be overtired, Buttercup managed, the excitement and all. Rest then, her mother cautioned. Terrible things can happen when you're overtired. I was overtired the night your father proposed. 34 and 22 and pulling away. Hi, Alpaca. Thank you. Three more subs for the next tweet. Buttercup went to her room. She lay on her bed. She closed her eyes. Oh no. One pack is a half a sub. Why do you do this to me? And the Countess was staring at Wesley. Buttercup got up from bed. She took off her clothes. She washed a little, got into her nightgown. She slipped between the sheets, snuggled down, closed her eyes. The Countess was still staring at Wesley. Buttercup threw back the sheets, opened her door. She went to the sink by the stove, poured herself a cup of water. She drank it down, poured another cup, and rolled its coolness across her forehead. The feverish feeling was still there. How feverish? She felt fine. She was 17 and not even a cavity. She dumped the water firmly into the sink, turned, marched back to her room, shut the door tight, went back to bed. She closed her eyes. The Countess would not stop staring at Wesley. Why? Why in the world would the woman in all the history of Florin, who was in all ways perfect, be interested in the farm boy? Buttercup rolled about in bed, and there was simply no other explanation in that look. She was interested. Buttercup shut her eyes tight and studied the memory of the Countess. Clearly, something about the farm boy interested her. Facts were facts. But what? The farm boy had eyes like the sea before a storm. But who cared about eyes? And he had pale blonde hair, if you liked that sort of thing. And he was broad enough in the shoulders, but not all that much broader than the Count. And certainly he was muscular, but anybody could be muscular who slaved all day. And his skin was perfect and tan, but that came again from slaving, in the sun all day. Who wouldn't be tan? And he wasn't that much taller than the Count either, although his stomach was flatter, but that was because the farm boy was younger. Buttercup sat up in bed. It must be his teeth. The farm boy did have good teeth. Gave credit where credit was due. White and perfect, particularly set against the sun-tanned skin. Could it have been anything else? Buttercup concentrated. The girls in the village followed the farm boy around a lot, whenever he was making deliveries. But they were idiots. They followed anything. And he always ignored them, because if he'd ever opened his mouth, they would have realized that was all he had, just good teeth. He was, after all, exceptionally stupid. That was really very strange, that a woman as beautiful and slender and willowy and graceful, a creature as perfectly packaged, as supremely dressed as the Countess, should be hung up on teeth that way. Buttercup shrugged. People were surprisingly complicated. But now she had it all diagnosed, deduced, clear. She closed her eyes and snuggled down and got all nice and comfortable. And people don't look at and people don't look at other people the way the Countess looked at the farm boy because of their teeth. Oh, Buttercup gasped. Oh, oh dear. Now the farm boy was staring back at the Countess. He was feeding the cows, and his muscles were rippling in the way they always did under his tanned skin, and Buttercup was standing there, watching as the farm boy looked, for the first time, deep into the Countess's eyes. Buttercup jumped out of bed and began to pace her room. How could he? Oh, it was all right if he looked at her, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at her. She's so old, Buttercup muttered, starting to storm a bit now. The Countess would never see 30 again, and that was a fact. And her dress looked ridiculous out in the cowshed, and that was a fact too. Buttercup fell onto her bed and clutched her pillow across her breasts. The dress was ridiculous before it ever got to the cowshed. The Countess looked rotten the minute she left the carriage, and her too big painted mouth, and her little piggy painted eyes, and her powdered skin, and flailing and thrashing, Buttercup wept and tossed and paced and wept some more. And there have been 3 great cases of jealousy since David of Galilee was first afflicted with the emotion when he could no longer stand the fact that his neighbor Saul's cactus outshone his own. Buttercup's case rated a close fourth on the all-time list. It was a very long and very green night. She was outside his hovel before dawn. Inside, she could hear him already awake. She knocked. He appeared, stood in the doorway. Behind him, she could see a tiny candle, open books. He waited. She looked at him. Then she looked away. He was too beautiful. I love you, Buttercup said. I know this must come as something of a surprise, since all I've ever done is scorn you and degrade you and taunt you, but I have loved you for several hours now, and every second more. I thought an hour ago I loved you more than any woman has ever loved a man. But half hour after that I knew that what I felt before was nothing compared to what I felt then. But 10 minutes after that I understood that my previous love was a puddle compared to the high seas before a storm. Your eyes are like that, did you know? Well, they are. How many minutes ago was I? 20? Had I brought my feelings up to then? It doesn't matter. Buttercup could still not look at him. The sun was rising behind her now. She could feel the heat on her back, and it gave her courage. I love you so much more now than 20 minutes ago, and there cannot be comparison. I love you so much more now than when you opened your hovel door. There cannot be comparison. There is no room in my body for anything but you. My arms love you. My ears adore you. My knees shake with blind affection. My mind begs you to ask it something so it can obey. Do you want me to follow you for the rest of your days? I will do that. Do you want me to crawl? I will crawl. I will be quiet for you, or sing for you. Or if you are hungry, let me bring you food. Or if you have thirst, and nothing will quench it but Arabian wine, I will go to Araby, even though it is across the world, and bring a bottle back for your lunch. Anything there is that I can do for you, I will do for you. Anything there is that I cannot do, I will learn to do. I know I cannot compete with the Countess in her skills or wisdom or appeal, and I saw the way she looked at you, and I saw the way you looked at her. But remember, please, that she is old and has other interests, while I am 17, and for me there is only you. Dearest Wesley, I've never called you that before, have I? Wesley, 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 Wesley. Darling Wesley, adored Wesley, sweet, perfect Wesley. Whisper that I have a chance to win your love. And with that, she dared the bravest thing she's ever done. She looked right into his eyes. He closed the door in her face. Without a word. Without a word. Buttercup ran. She whirled and burst away, and the tears came bitterly. She could not see. She stumbled. She slammed into a tree trunk, fell, rose, ran on. Her shoulder throbbed from where the tree trunk hit her, and the pain was strong, but not enough to ease her shattered heart. Back to her room she fled. back to her pillow, safe behind the locked door. She drenched the world with tears. Not even one word. He hadn't had the decency for that. Sorry, he could have said. Would it have been would it have ruined him to say sorry too late? He could have said. Why couldn't he at least have said something? Buttercup thought very hard about that for a moment, and suddenly she had the answer. He didn't talk because the minute he opened his mouth, there it was. Sure, he was handsome, but dumb. The minute he had exercised his tongue, it would have all been over. Duh. That's what he would have said. That was the kind of thing Wesley came out with when he was feeling really sharp. Duh. Tanks, Buttercup. Buttercup dried her tears and began to smile. She took a deep breath, heaved a sigh. It was all part of growing up. You get these little quick passions, you blinked, and they were gone. You forgave faults, found perfection, felt, fell madly. Then the next day the sun came up and it was over. Chalk it up to experience, old girl, and get on with the morning. Buttercup stood, made her bed, changed her clothes, combed her hair, smiled, and burst out again in a fit of weeping. Because there was a limit to just how much you could lie to yourself. Wesley wasn't stupid. Oh, she could pretend he was. She could laugh about his difficulties with the language. She could chide herself for her silly infatuation with a dullard. The truth was simply this. He had a head on his shoulders, with a brain inside every bit as good as his teeth. There was a reason he hadn't spoken, and it had nothing to do with the gray cells working. He hadn't spoken because, really, there was nothing for him to say. He didn't love her back, and that was that. The tears that kept Buttercup company the remainder of the day were not at all like those that had blinded her into the tree trunk. Those were noisy and hot. They pulsed. These were silent and steady, and all they did was remind her that she wasn't good enough. She was 17, and every male she'd ever known had crumbled at her feet, and it meant nothing. The one time it mattered, she wasn't good enough. All she knew, really, was riding, and how was that to interest a man when that man had been looked at by the Countess? It was dusk when she heard footsteps outside her door, then a knock. Buttercup dried her eyes. Another knock. Whoever is that? Buttercup yawned finally. Wesley. Buttercup lounged across the bed. Wesley? She asked. Do I know any Oh, farm boy, it's you. How droll. She went to her door, unlocked it, and said in her fanciest tone, I'm ever so glad you stopped by. I've been feeling just ever so slummy about that little joke I played on you this morning. Of course you knew I wasn't, for a moment, serious, or at least I thought you knew. But then, just when you started closing the door, I thought for one dreary instant that perhaps I'd done my little jest a bit too convincingly, and, poor dear thing, you might have thought I meant it, what I said, when of course we both know the total impossibility of that ever happening. I've come to say good-bye. Buttercup, Buttercup's heart buckled, but she still held to fancy. You're going to sleep, you mean? You've come by to say good night? How thoughtful of you, farm boy, showing me that you forgive me for my little morning's tease. I certainly appreciate your thoughtfulness, Anne. He cut her off. I'm leaving. Leaving? The floor began to ripple. She held to the door frame. Now? Yes. Because what I said this morning? Yes. I frightened you away, didn't I? I could kill my tongue. She shook her head and shook her head. Well, it's done. You've made your decision. Just remember this. I won't take you back when she's done with you. I don't care if you beg. He just looked at her. Buttercup hurried on. Just because you're beautiful and perfect, it's made you conceited. You think people can't get tired of you. Well, you're wrong. They can, and she will. Besides, you're too poor. I'm going to America to seek my fortune. A ship sails soon from London. There is great opportunity in America. I'm going to take advantage of it. I've been training myself in my hovel. I've taught myself not to need sleep. A few hours only. I'll take a 10-hour a day job, and then I'll take another 10-hour-a-day job, and I'll save every penny from both except what I need to eat to keep strong, and when I have enough money to buy a farm and build a house and make a big enough bed for two. You're just crazy if you think she's going to be happy in some run-down farmhouse in America. Not with what she spends on clothes. Stop talking about the Countess as a special favor before you drive me mad. Buttercup looked at him. Don't you understand anything that's going on? Buttercup shook her head. Wesley shook his too. You never have been the brightest, I guess. Do you love me, Wesley? Is that it? He couldn't believe it. Do I love you? My God, if your love were a grain of sand, mine would be a universe of beaches. If your love were— I don't understand that first one yet, Buttercup interrupted. She was starting to get very excited now. Let me get this straight. You're saying my love is the size of a grain of sand and yours is the other thing? Images just confuse me so. Is this universal business of yours bigger than my sand? Help me, Wesley. I have a feeling we're on the verge of something just terribly important. I have stayed these years in my hovel because of you. I have taught myself languages because of you. I have made my body strong because I thought you might be pleased by a strong body. I have lived my life with only the prayer that some sudden dawn you might glance in my direction. I have not known a moment in years when the sight of you did not send my heart careening against my rib cage. I have not known a night when your visage did not accompany me to sleep. There has not been a morning when you did not flutter behind my waking eyelids. Is any of this getting through to you, Buttercup? Or do you want me to go on for a while? Never stop. There has not been— If you're teasing me, Wesley, I'm just going to kill you. How can you ever dream how can you ever dream I might be teasing? Well, you haven't once said you loved me. That's all you need? Easy. I love you. Okay? Want it louder? I love you. Spell it out, should I? I love you. Want it backward? You love I. You're teasing now, aren't you? Maybe a little. I've been saying it so long to you, you just wouldn't listen. Every time you said farm boy, do this, you thought I was answering as you wish, but that's only because you were hearing wrong. I love you was what it was, but you never heard, and you never heard. I hear you now, and I promise you this, I will never love anyone else, only Wesley, until I die. He nodded, took a step away. I'll send for you soon, believe me. Would my Wesley ever lie? He took another step. I'm late. I must go. I hate it, but I must. The ship sails soon, as London is far. I understand. He reached out with his right hand. Buttercup found it very hard to breathe. Goodbye. She managed to raise her right hand to his. They shook. Goodbye, he said again. She made a little nod. He took a third step, not turning. She watched him. He turned, and the words ripped out of her. Without one kiss, they fell into each other's arms. There have been 5 great kisses since 1642 B.C., when Saul and Delilah Corn's inadvertent discovery swept across Western civilization, and the precise rating of kisses is a terribly difficult thing, often leading to great controversy, because although everyone agrees that the formula of affection times purity times intensity times duration, no one has ever been completely satisfied with how much weight each element should receive. But only but on any system there are 5 that everyone agrees deserves full marks. Well, this one left them all behind. The first morning after Wesley's departure, Buttercup thought she was entitled to do nothing more than sit around moping and feeling sorry for herself. After all, the love of her life had fled. Life had no meaning. How could you face the future, etc., etc.? But after about 2 seconds of that she realized that Wesley was out in the world now, getting nearer and nearer to London. And what if a beautiful city girl caught his fancy while she was just back here mouldering? Or, worse, what if he got to America and worked his jobs and built his farm and made their bed and sent for her? When she got there, he would look at her and say, I'm sending you back. The moping has destroyed your eyes. The self-pity has taken your skin. You're a slabby-looking creature. I'm marrying an Indian girl who lives in a teepee nearby and is always in the peak of condition." Buttercup ran to her bedroom window. "Oh, Wesley," she said, "I must never disappoint you." And she hurried downstairs where her parents were squabbling. 16 to 13, and not past breakfast yet. "I need your advice," she interrupted. "What can I do to improve my personal appearance?" "Start by bathing," her father said. "And do something with your hair while you're at it," her mother said. "Unearth the territory behind your ears. Neglect not your knees." "That will do nicely for starters," Buttercup said. She shook her head. "Gracious, but it isn't easy being tidy." Undaunted, she set to work. Every morning she awoke, if possible by dawn, and got the farm chores finished immediately. There was much to be done, now that Wesley was gone. And more than that, ever since the Count had visited, everyone in the area had increased his milk order, so there was no time for self-improvement until well into the afternoon. But then she really set to work. First a good cold bath, then while her hair was drying, she would slave after fixing her figure faults. One of her elbows was just too bony, the opposite wrist not bony enough, and exercise what remained of her baby fat, little left now that she was nearly 18, and brush her hair. Her hair was the color of autumn, and it had never been cut, so 1,000 strokes took time, but she didn't mind, because Wesley had never seen it clean like this, and wouldn't he be surprised when she stepped off the boat in America? Her skin was the color of wintry cream, and she scrubbed her every inch well past glistening. And that wasn't much fun, really. But wouldn't Wesley be pleased with how clean she was as she stepped off the boat in America? And very quickly now her potential began to be realized. From 20th she jumped within 2 weeks to 15th, an unheard of change in such a time. But 3 weeks after that she was already ninth and moving. The competition was tremendous now. But the day after she was ninth, a three-page letter arrived from Wesley in London, and just reading it over put her up to eighth. It was really what was doing it for her more than anything. Her love for Wesley would not stop growing, and people were dazzled when she delivered milk in the morning. Some people were only able to gape at her, but many talked, and those that did found her warmer and gentler than she had ever been before. Even the village girls would nod and smile now, and some of them would often ask after Wesley, which was a mistake unless you happened to have a lot of spare time, because when someone asked Buttercup how Wesley was, well, she told them. He was supreme as usual. He was spectacular. He was singularly fabulous. Oh, she would go on for hours. Sometimes it got a little tough for listeners to maintain strict attention, but they did their best, since Buttercup loved him so completely, which is why Wesley's death hit her the way it did. He had written to her just before he sailed for America. The Queen's Pride was his ship, and he loved her. That was the way his sentences always went. "It is raining today, and I love you. My cold is better, and I love you. Say hello to horse, and I love you," like that. Then there were no letters. But that was natural. He was at sea. Then she heard. She came home from delivering the milk, and her parents were wooden. "Off the Carolina coast," her father whispered. Her mother whispered, "Without warning, at night." "What?" from Buttercup. "Pirates," said her father. Buttercup thought she'd better sit down. Quiet in the room. "He's been taken a prisoner, then," Buttercup managed. Her mother made a no. "It was Roberts," her father said. "The dread pirate Roberts." "Oh," Buttercup said. "The one who never leaves survivors." "Yes," her father said. Quiet in the room. Suddenly Buttercup was talking very fast. "Was he stabbed? Did he drown? Did they cut his throat? Did they wake him, do you suppose? Perhaps they whipped him dead." She stopped then. I'm getting silly, forgive me. She shook her head, as if the way they got him mattered. Excuse me, please. With that, she hurried to her room. She stayed there many days. At first, her parents tried to lure her, but she would not have it. They took to leaving food outside her room, and she took bits and shreds, enough to stay alive. There was never noise inside, no wailing, no bitter sounds, and when she came out at last, her eyes were dry. Her parents started up from their silent breakfast at her. They both started to rise, but she put a hand out, stopped them. I can care for myself, please. She set about getting some food. They watched her closely. In point of fact, she never looked at all. She had entered the room as just an impossibly lovely girl. The woman who emerged was a trifle thinner, a great deal wiser, an ocean sadder. This one understood the nature of pain, and beneath the glory of her features there was character, and a sure knowledge of suffering. She was 18. She was the most beautiful woman in 100 years. She didn't seem to care. You're all right? Her mother asked. Buttercup sipped her cocoa. Fine, she said. You're sure? Her father wondered. Yes, Buttercup replied. There was a very long pause. But I must never love again. And she never did. That was chapter 1. Oh, excuse me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And, oh, excuse me. Power. Okay, so how is everybody doing so far? Oh, poor panda. Yeah, that is actually the first chapter. And that is the story that pretty much everybody voted on. Well, those who actually responded. So, yeah. Still waiting for power to come on? I thought Panda said it was already on. So yeah, waiting for systems to come on can be a little bit of a butt. What was that? Add 15 minutes. Okay. But yeah, I'm gonna see if I can try to read a little bit at a time. Adding all the time cards, Alpaca. So how many people have actually seen the movie? That's a lot of time cards, dude. It's my love.
Yeah.
Helios said he has not seen the movie. We can fix this. And I think we're gonna have to fix this. Are you in our server, Alpaca? Our Discord server? Well, if you join our server, we can see about having a little watch party. Honey, can you put the server link in the chat, please?
Give me one.
Let me see. Exclamation mark. Boom! There you go, Alpaca. So, anybody who wants to join the Discord, feel free to do so, and we can see if we can set up a watch party. Was it? We are 12.5 subs from actually our next goal, which actually is Monster Hunter Iceborne. I have to go after Shara, Ishvalda, and Sago has to go after Fatalis. I just I've stopped playing Monster Hunter a little bit because my anxiety has been through the roof. I have actually beaten Shara Ishvalda. That was actually on PlayStation though, so we're Xbox. I'm sorry. I used to have a PlayStation, but it's been a while. Let's see. Boink. Welcome, Alpaca. Woo! Let's see. Patron. I should probably check this out. Oh, shit. I have to go and do the Yeah, it's we had a friend that we were living with. Like we had a roommate at the time that had an Xbox. We had an Xbox, so me and Sago could play at the same time. And when we moved, we no longer had that option. Yeah, Demon's actually been playing with us on PC because we've been doing it all over again. I had 1,300 hours on Xbox. I did every single event quest, optional, and regular quest, and Alatreon just smacked me in the face. I'm like, I'm good. Literally, I got to Alatreon. I'm like, nope. However, the one monster in the event quest that I actually could not defeat was Extreme Behemoth. So I actually can't say I did every event one. That was the one I couldn't do. Although not for lack of trying. Speaking of, hey Demon, are you're playing Monster Hunter right now? Um, and then we had our friend when we were replaying on PC. Was it when we first met Star? He went ahead and did World and Iceborne in a week and a half. We're like, damn, because quite a while ago we were actually streaming our playthrough of PC, and then all of a sudden he showed up in full Fatalis gear, and we're like, you are crazy, sir. But damn. So, your buzz? Are you drunk, sir?
He was drinking vodka.
You were drinking vodka this morning. Oh yeah, by the way, for anybody who likes like the reactive that I have and like some of the food stuff that we've got, let's see, bam, this is our artist. And apparently she is opening up commissions on December 1st. She probably not gonna like me saying that, but too bad, Panda. I said I was gonna promote you, and damn it, I will. So, yeah, she does not like me promoting her because she gets a little, I guess you could say embarrassed? No, she really can't. She absolutely can't. And I literally, Helios helped me put the command for Panda on there so that way I can shout her out. She does not like that, but you know what? Whatever. She does amazing stuff, and I am effectively what?
As soon as I'm done.
Okay. And I am perfectly fine with using her work. Yes, Helios, shout your wife out, 'cause I just did. I don't know if she realizes that I'm doing this, but yeah, she is absolutely amazing, and she December 1st will start getting the cookies ready for those that she's going to be mailing them to, and we'll be opening commissions again because oh my God, she's almost done with our Yule menu because we will actually be having a winter menu as well, and she offered it. Yes, we're paying for it. I mean, yeah, but winter menu, there's going to be a spring one and a summer one. She offered to make them, and I'm just like, you know what? Yes. Now, something that I'm going to do that haven't really said anything like whatever. If you guys want to see something for the spring or summer menu, DM me in Sagrel. Say, this is something that I would like to see because we came up with the stuff for the revamping of the main menu for the Halloween menu and the Christmas menu. But if there's something that you really, really, really want to see, DM us. And there's only going to be 15 items for the seasonal ones to start them. And then I'm probably going to see if I can add maybe two a season after that. But I mean, if there's something that you guys really like my favorite winter drink is eggnog. So that's going to be on the winter menu. If there's something that is your favorite, I would love to hear it. I said, not yet for the winter one. That's going to be start DMing me that stuff on like during October. Uh, and then we'll go through, we'll make a list of what you guys want to see, and we'll just start picking some things and just adding them. Depending on if we get any or how many we receive, we might just put them all in. But yeah, and it's she absolutely loves to draw, so we are giving her some stuff to do. But yeah, this has actually just been so amazing with you guys. I think was it moderators can? Moderator and up because I don't want people just mass shouting people out. So she can shout herself out, but I doubt that's going to happen. I made that only a moderator and up thing, honey.
Oh, okay.
So again, not everybody does it. Which are you a mod, Helios? Wait, I don't think you're a mod. Do you want to be a mod? So you can just randomly shout your wife out because she ain't going to do it for herself. I mean, you're a mod for the Discord server. Yes, Helios is actually a mod in our Discord server. So y'all need help in if you guys are in the Discord server and you need help, him, Star, and then myself and Sagril are the admins. You're fine, okay. Okay, so um, screw it. So what are you guys planning on doing?
We're gonna play Final Fantasy.
Oh, that's cool. So
Final Fantasy 14's down today.
Final Fantasy 14 is actually down for maintenance today. So I'm going to. Yes, and actually Panda is considered a super mod. She actually has a bunch of privileges and things that she can do. We figured out how to do that. I don't remember how to do that, but yeah. So we are going to me and Sagar will be handing off. I'll be handing it to him and yeah, but yeah, I know. Apparently there's a thing called a super mod that has really amazing things that she can do or that they can do. I'm like, I need one person to be a super mod. Who is the person who sits in my chat and snipes things the most and does the most crap for me? Panda, which technically super mods should be dedicated to one chat, but she actually fits it. Um, but yeah, so I actually appreciate everything you guys have been doing for us. And Sagril's going to be playing Final Fantasy 1 with Nell, and Nell has actually altered some of the sprites uh, to be some of the VTuber friends. I am not one of them because I don't play, so makes sense.
There's only 6 classes, honey.
Honey, I'm saying why I'm not appearing in there and that it's fine. It actually makes sense. I'm not complaining. I am stating facts. Like, literally. She is amazing at multitasking. But, so let me go ahead and take the power hour thingy down because when I jump back, like, if we're able to make it to tomorrow, I know we're at 5. Yeah, we've been yo-yoing around 5 hours. We go down to 1 hour. Here comes Alpaca. Oh my God, child! Stop scaring me, you booger! You.
4.5 hours. God damn it.
Yeah, I know. It was just like, okay, so we're going, dude. What was it? Yesterday we got down to 20 seconds, and then all of a sudden, here comes the subs, and it was power hours, so we shot back up to 4 hours. That was that was amazing. That was amazing. Like, you guys are awesome. So I'm going to be shifting things over to Sagril. So you guys, if you guys want to stay, um, you guys can watch him and Nell play Final Fantasy with custom sprites. So, you ready, sweetheart?
Ready?
4, 3, 2, 1. Stop streaming.